Hey guys, how are you today? I hope you're doing great. With this pandemic situation that has been ongoing, well, we have no choice but to continue the way we are at the moment. So, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be teaching you on how to write a letter. This applies for both higher and ordinary level English. So, I hope you guys enjoy and benefit from this as much as you can. This lecture will be given in two forms. First, I'm going to explain some basic stuff on how to write a letter, but then I will share my screen with you and technically attempt one in a simplistic form, if I may. So first things first, in the Leaving Cert, as you guys have seen, past papers, a letter is one form of a B question. Paper one that comes up a lot of times. It also comes up in single text as a 30 point sometimes. And in some instances, it comes up as a form of composition out of the seven choices at the end of paper one. However, most of the time that I've seen a letter come up is in a comprehension, part B, a 50 point. In this sense, is going to give you a text. As you know, like comprehension has three different texts. Paper one comprehension has three different, texts, and where you have to choose two of them. One you answer a question, the other one you answer a B. So in this sense here, you are going to answer a B question. If a letter comes up, then you should definitely choose it because it's one of the easiest forms of writing in my own personal opinion. I've been teaching the Leaving Cert for the past 3 years, and I myself have done them long time ago. So basically, there are two types of letters: personal letters, formal letters. You have to. Sometimes they don't tell you if a letter is personal or it's formal, and you have to detect it. So how do you know if a letter is personal or it's formal? You have to take a look at the content of the comprehension, first things first. Second of all, look at the type of the question given. Now, if the type of the letter is provided in terms of it being personal or formal, then you're very lucky, you know immediately what to do. Now, what are examples of formal letters? What are examples of personal letters? Formal letters are, I don't know, if you're complaining about something. If you bought shoes and they don't fit you, and you're returning them to the store, so you need to write a letter. Well, technically, we'll write an email, or call them. But for the sake of learning, you will write a letter and explain about how you bought these shoes, about how they didn't fit you, and what your intent is to do with such shoes. Job application letters. This is a very recurring type of formal letter as well. Sales. So, what I said at the beginning. Um, what about personal letters? For instance, if I'm writing a letter to a friend of mine who I want to invite, let's say, to my wedding, or for instance, if I'm writing a letter where I would like, I don't know, I just want to check up on a friend or something, or give my opinion on a certain subject. I know we no longer write letters, but the Leaving Cert hasn't changed in that matter. Um, you should always know why are you writing it. Never start writing a letter without actually planning out in front of you a draft. Like that should take you about a minute or two just to figure out what am I doing, why am I writing it, what is my point, what does the question say. I'll go in depth with that. I'll actually provide you with an analyzed example showing you um, how to break down the question and how to approach it. What is the layout of a letter? Always, by all means, on the right side, top right side, you should always include the address of yourself, right? So the sender's address. Um, right under that is the date. What date? The date that you are writing this letter. The format is very important in those, what do I call them? Comprehending sections, or like composition sections. Like the format is, a lot of the marks are lost if you don't follow the exact format. So right side, your address. the sender's address. Right under it is the date of sending it. Now, where does the issue arise? You would think that a date is easy to, just look at today's date and use it, right? But what if it comes up in a single text 60-point question to write a letter? Well, it hasn't come up in higher. I haven't seen it come up in higher before, but it's a possibility. In ordinary, it comes up as a 30, right? As a 60-point or a 30-point, if it comes up and it tells you, you are William Shakespeare, and write a letter to, I don't know, whatever audience, explain to them why Hamlet is important to be studied today. So you gotta write the date of the time that Shakespeare was alive. How would you know that? If you have studied William Shakespeare's Hamlet, you would. Now, on the left side, under the date on the left side, so the opposite side, you have to write the address of the recipient, all right? So the person receiving the letter. Now, if you're asking me what kind of address should I put, how do I put it? So there are 3 lines of addresses, all right? You start with the smallest to the largest. So for example, you start with the street name and number, then maybe city and then country, or you can even do street name, number, region, or maybe area, and then country, or city and country. So you're free to play with that as much as you can, right? This applies for both the sender's address and the recipient's address as well. Right under that, right under the recipient's address, you need to start addressing the person that you're writing to. So, dear sir or madam would be a proper way to write this if you are writing to someone that you don't know, if you don't know who is gonna, read your letter. So if you're asking me how is that possible, as I said earlier, if you're writing to a store willing to return your shoes. If you're writing to a friend, dear John, I don't know, whatever. Now, what if it's a formal letter? So there's a difference. If you're writing to someone formally, and if you're writing to someone personally, on a personal level, it's also varies on how to start. So, dear Mr. John, or Mrs. Smith, or I don't know, I'm using very common names to demonstrate an example. Address them by their last name if it's a formal letter, for instance. That will be a major difference. Or if you're writing a personal letter, you can even start by saying my friend, John, for instance. This is the easiest and safest way to start it is dear, then a name after it. So as personal, write dear John, first name. As formal, dear, I don't know, Mr. or Mrs. whatever, comma. You skip a line or whatever you're doing, or you indent, and then you start writing your first paragraph. Now, the question is, the first paragraph is always about the reasoning behind why you're writing such letter. So why am I writing this letter is always mentioned in the first paragraph. Now, it always depends on, this is always the case, but it also depends on the question. So if I'm writing a letter about returning the shoes that I bought that don't fit me, I would say, and it's also formal or informal. So if I'm writing to a store, it's probably a formal letter, because I have no idea who's going to respond to it, or who's going to read it. I am going to say something like, dear sir or madam, comma. I'll skip a line, start a new paragraph, and I would say, I'm writing this letter to inform you about a recent purchase, full stop. I have purchased a pair of Nike shoes from your store last Thursday on, and then you mentioned the date. I'm willing to return them since unfortunately they do not fit me as per, I don't know, my shoe size, whatever. You just give a reason. You don't have to say about fitting. Maybe the item that you ordered was broken, or maybe the question gives you the instructions of what you should be writing about. But I'm just giving you an example, right? If it's personal, you can start off by just asking something personal, like, hey John, I hope my letter finds you well. I heard your wife is pregnant with your second baby. Or you can say something like, If you're writing to a teenager your age, you can say something like, I don't know, dear Mary, I hope you're doing well. I heard you got a new camera. I'm really willing to. I would like to use it, try it. I don't know, whatever it is. You can get personal on that level, and then start saying why you're writing. Anyways, I wanted to tell you that recently I've also started being into photography, and I wanted your opinion on which type of camera do I buy. For example, you see what you see what I did there? Like I asked her about her camera, and then I went back and said, what do you think I should get? Of course, this is also always binding upon what the question asks you, right? Now, like the paragraphing, it depends on the question and how many points it is. Obviously, if it comes up as 100 points, which should be around 900, 1,000 words, a little bit more than that, you should divide it into more paragraphs. But if it's like 50, then I would say I would write the intro, what I just said, the introductory paragraph, and then I would maybe use 3 different paragraphs, and then I'll conclude, right? But every paragraph that you write about has a different point, has a different idea. The paragraph structure is very important, where we award you points on language and mechanics. So every paragraph that you write in a letter has to be about something. So you're asking me, if I'm returning shoes, what would my paragraphs be about? I'm just simply returning shoes and there's nothing. Yes, I agree with you, because the example I provided was very basic, and in a second when I share my screen with you and I attempt to answer a question, I will show you like the real deal on how to divide your paragraphs. Jumping into a conclusion, you should always end it by saying, okay, what now, right? So like, for instance, I would say, going back to the shoes example, I would say something like, hereby, I hope you took the time, or thank you for taking the time to read my letter. I am hoping that you cooperate with me, and I plan to visit your store on, and then you give a date. Please let me know if this is a suitable time and convenience for visitation, or I don't know, whatever, full stop. And then the salutation is very important. So what you do is say something like, if I'm writing a formal letter, I have different ways to end it. I would say, kind regards, best regards, sincerely yours, or yours sincerely, comma, and then your name, right? Now, if it's someone you love that you're writing a letter, you can always end it by saying with love, but there's no way on earth that you can end the letter that you're writing professionally or to someone that you don't know by saying with love. That's absurd and it wouldn't work. Common sense, right? Yeah, so basically these are the basics on how to write letters. I know in practice it's much harder, and that's why we're about to look at a specific example from a past paper and try to attempt it together. At least I'll give you an insight on what to do exactly. All right, thank you very much and stay tuned. Hey guys, so as promised, this is the mock question 2020, do schools kill creativity? Text 3. So as you see, the part B question here says that I should write a personal letter to Sir Ken Robinson, whatever. So here we are lucky because it tells us exactly that the letter I'm writing is a personal one, right? I have to write about my own views on the significance of creative subjects being taught in schools or as extracurricular experiences, the education system structure and its emphasis on exams, and as well as how I think the education system should be improved. So there are 3 different things that I have to mention in my letter. All right? Now, a rule of thumb is every single time that I get to the B question in my exam is I have to read the comprehension itself. Now, I'm aware that sometimes the content of my letter will have nothing to do with this, but as you have to remember that this is a comprehension. So everything that I write has to deal with what I read. And sometimes even if I drift off, I have to always come back to this. It's always good, and it's always, gives you extra marks when you refer to something that Sir Ken Robinson has mentioned. And you actually have to do that because it's a comprehension. So in this sense, I have to talk about what I think or my views on the significance of creative subjects. Here, if you read it, and you should take the time to read this before you watch my video, he talks about how his son, he was 4, he was the nativity play now, and he also talks about how every education system on earth has the same hierarchy of subjects, how we're not diversified, and how we all just teach scientific subjects or history or whatever it is, but we don't really focus on dancing or majorly on art or like other subjects or cooking or mechanics or whatever it is, but like we focus more on, you know, the essential scientific subjects. So this is something that I would like to bring up in my answer. But in my letter, I would also want to mention something like I have to refer to Sir Ken Robinson, and I would say one of my views of the significance of creative subjects is similar to your view. So I have to show the examiner that I've actually read the comprehension and that I actually agree with Sir Ken Robinson's view. Okay, so this is a very important factor when writing a letter. So this is one of the paragraphs that I would, for instance, talk about my view on the significance of creative subjects. I can also disagree with his views, but I have to mention him. I have to mention what he thought of. I have to mention what he says. Try to use try to stick to try not to have issues with tense inconsistency, going back and forth with past and present simple tense or whatever tense you're using. Try to be free in terms of these errors. I also have to talk about the education system structure and and its emphasis on exams. He mentions that too in this paragraph, and he gives his own opinion. So you should come up with your own opinion, your own creativity on what is your truthful opinion about the matter. So what is going on really in the world today or in Ireland, all right? As well as how I think the education system should be improved. So what are the points that I want to mention in terms of how I would like to improve the education system? Maybe I can refer back to the first paragraph about how we should focus more also on other subjects like creative subjects like music or art or whatever. I can also talk about building different schools or trying to be helpful more to the mentally incapable, or I could bring up my own ideas, right? So this is a 50-mark question and it should be around 500 words or more. And basically that's it. So the point is, I know it's much harder when you try to attempt and write one, but this is the entire idea. Know your structure, know your paragraphing. I will base my paragraphing on the first paragraph. I'll talk about the significance or my views on the significance of creative subjects, all right? And I will mention about how I agree with his view or I don't. The second one, I'll talk about the education system structure. How do we teach? What do we teach? Maybe talk about this pandemic that we're going through. Its emphasis on exams. I can mention certain quotes here. All right, talk about quotes that I know, like Albert Einstein's quote on, "If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you will think your entire life that it is stupid," or something like that. And then my third paragraph, I'll talk about. I'm not counting the introduction as a paragraph, so my third body paragraph would be about how to improve the education system. If he mentioned, and he did mention something about how we improve our education, I can always go back to agreeing or disagreeing with him, and then elaborating further on what I think and how I think it should be improved. And basically that's it. I can conclude it by saying that I hope he responds back to my letter, and I hope that he takes it into consideration, that I agree or disagree with him and all that, and that will be it, basically. Right, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope to see you soon, and stay tuned.